All right, let me show you what I have implemented. So here we go to the vehicle page. This is our new vehicle page where we have all the information in the read-only format. You can see we have two tabs, vehicle and photos, which is currently empty. Now back here we have a few sections, basics, and here we're simply rendering, make, model, and registered as list items. We've got features and contact again as list items. Now here we have three buttons. Edit, that takes us to this edit form. We have delete, which is the functionality I moved from our vehicle form into this new page. And a third button, view all vehicles, which takes us back here. Now if I create a new vehicle, we get this toasty and we are redirected to this view vehicle page. So this is the user experience I was talking about. Now let's quickly review the code I have written. So in the components folder, I have created this new folder, view vehicle. Here we have a new component, very straightforward. I've got a couple of fields here. One is vehicle and the other is vehicle ID. Now the reason I separated these two fields is because here in the constructor, we're subscribing to these route parameters. Now at this stage, I don't want to initialize the vehicle object. So I want to initially leave the vehicle object as undefined. That's why I'm storing this ID that we pass here to this page into this field vehicle ID. Now in our template, I've applied this ngIf directive on the div with the class tab content. So I'm rendering this div only if we have a vehicle object. Now without this ngIf, I would have to initialize this vehicle object and set some of the basic properties like make, model, and so on, because here we're referencing them in our interpolation strings. Now in our component, I didn't want to initialize this vehicle field like this, setting the make to a blank object so we can access the name property or model. It's a little bit ugly. We don't really need default values here because we're not editing a vehicle. So I decided to keep it as undefined, and that's why we have a separate field to keep track of the ID. Otherwise, if I store the ID like this, .id, then in our template, I couldn't use ngIf like this. Okay? Now, let's revert this back. So here in subscribing to route parameters, I've also added this code. So if vehicle ID is not a number, or if it's less than or equal to 0, I'm simply navigating the user back to the vehicles page because I don't want to send a request to the server with an invalid ID. There is no point. Now in ng-on-init, we simply subscribe to this get vehicle observable. If we have the vehicle, we set the vehicle. Otherwise, we navigate the user back to the vehicles list. And finally, this delete method here, we had this in vehicle form component. I simply moved that code here. So this is our new view vehicle component. Now in app module, I made a couple of changes in our routes. So previously, we had this route, vehicles/id, and this was linked to vehicle form component. Now it's linked to view vehicle component. I also added a new route, vehicles/edit/id, which is handled by the vehicle form component. Also, we had a bug in our vehicle form component. So earlier, I modified this component and used it for editing vehicles. And at that point, I think I broke something. So I realized we couldn't create a new vehicle because when I clicked the save button, ID of this vehicle was null, and on the server we got an error. So to fix this problem, I made this change here. So when we go to /vehicle/new, we don't have this ID parameter, and the value of the ID property of this vehicle will be 0. Now one last thing here, I consolidated this submit method. So here we have this result variable, which is an observable. And note that here I've added a $sign. That's a convention that some developers use to indicate that this is an observable. So here, if we have a vehicle ID, we set this observable to vehicle service.update method. Otherwise, we set it to vehicle service.create. And then we subscribe to this observable, and here we display a toasty and navigate the user to the view vehicle page. Now, if you want to code along with me, you can download the application up to this point from this lecture. And from the next lecture, we're going to implement photo upload.